I'm Dwayne, 33, and last year I finally bought my dream lake house for $515,000 after a decade of 70-hour work weeks. Everything was perfect until my sister Amanda grinned across our family dinner table and announced, "We're moving in Monday. Dad already approved." I felt my stomach drop. That night, while reviewing security footage on my phone, the alert pinged, "Motion detected, trespassing recorded." What followed would test every boundary I'd ever set. Before I tell you how my family tried to take over my dream home, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever had to stand your ground against family. Growing up in Sterling Heights, Michigan, money was always a sensitive topic in our household. My parents, Thomas and Barbara, worked respectable jobs, but never quite reached financial comfort. Dad managed a hardware store while Mom taught at the local elementary school. They provided the basics, but luxuries were rare. From an early age, I watched them stress over bills spread across the kitchen table each month, and I promised myself I'd find a different path. My parents believed in traditional values: work hard, save your money, and most importantly, family comes first. They repeated these mantras throughout my childhood. While well-intentioned, their definition of family comes first often translated to, "Your needs come second," to family needs. This dynamic would become the foundation of our conflicts years later. School came naturally to me, and I recognized education as my ticket to financial independence. While other kids spent summers at the community pool, I mowed lawns, delivered newspapers, and stocked shelves at the local grocery store. By 16, I had saved nearly $3,000, which I proudly kept in a savings account, rather than spending on video games or clothes like my friends. Amanda, 3 years older than me, took a different approach to life. Where I was cautious and methodical, she was spontaneous and free-spirited. She changed college majors 4 times before settling on communications, and even then graduated a year late. Our parents supported her throughout, covering her apartment costs and car payments, while encouraging me to be responsible with my own expenses. When college came, I earned a partial scholarship to Michigan State, but it wasn't enough. I worked 2 part-time jobs throughout my computer science program, sometimes sleeping only 4 hours a night to finish assignments after closing shifts at the campus bookstore. Meanwhile, Amanda had moved back home after graduation, figuring things out while working retail positions that never seemed to last. After graduation, I accepted an entry-level position at a tech consulting firm in Detroit. The salary wasn't impressive, but the experience was valuable. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, brought lunch from home every day, and put 40% of each paycheck into savings. My coworkers thought I was extreme, but I had a plan. Each promotion and raise went mostly toward my growing Lakehouse fund, rather than lifestyle upgrades. The dream of owning a lake house wasn't random. Some of my happiest childhood memories came from 2 summers when my parents splurged on a week-long rental at Lake Michigan. I remembered those peaceful mornings, watching the sunrise over the water, feeling a sense of possibility that our suburban home never provided. I wanted that feeling permanently. By 30, I had moved into senior consulting roles, developing expertise in systems integration that few others in my firm possessed. Clients requested me specifically, and my salary reflected my value. Still, I lived well below my means, driving a practical sedan and sharing an apartment with a roommate despite being able to afford much more. After 10 years of disciplined saving and strategic career moves, I had accumulated enough for a substantial down payment. The search for the perfect lake house took nearly 8 months. I visited 36 properties, researched local regulations, and calculated potential maintenance costs before finally finding the one on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. The house wasn't perfect initially. At $515,000, it stretched my budget to its limit, but the location was ideal and the structure sound. The 3-bedroom modern design needed updates, but had good bones. I negotiated the price down, secured financing with my excellent credit score, and signed the papers with a sense of accomplishment that outshined any other achievement in my life. The renovation process took 4 additional months and nearly depleted my remaining savings, but the result was worth every penny and sleepless night. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the water view, and the open-concept kitchen gleamed with new appliances. The deck I had rebuilt myself stretched toward the shoreline, creating the perfect spot for morning coffee or evening relaxation after stressful workdays. When I finally moved in last spring, the sense of pride was overwhelming. This wasn't just a house, it was tangible proof that my years of sacrifice and hard work had culminated in something beautiful and entirely mine. I took photos and shared them with family, receiving congratulatory messages that seemed genuinely supportive. "So proud of you, son," Dad texted while Mom called to get all the details about the renovations. Amanda sent a brief, nice place text that I interpreted as approval. Little did I know that those supportive messages contained underlying expectations that would soon reveal themselves in ways I never anticipated. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs long before the crisis erupted. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated by their different expectations of me versus my sister. Thomas. My father grew up in a traditional household where the man was expected to provide for everyone. He applied this same expectation to me despite the changing times. "A man takes care of his family," he'd repeat whenever I questioned being volunteered for tasks Amanda was never asked to do. Barbara. My mother played peacekeeper, but ultimately reinforced these dynamics. She'd console me privately about unfair situations but never challenged Dad's decisions. "Your sister just needs more help," she would explain when Amanda received financial assistance for problems she had created herself. "You're so capable, Dwayne. You don't need us like she does." This pattern continued into adulthood. When Amanda married Brad right after college, my parents contributed $20,000 toward their wedding, nearly emptying their modest savings. When I mentioned possibly getting married to my then-girlfriend Melissa 2 years later, Dad casually mentioned that we seemed responsible enough to handle our own expenses. Amanda and Brad bought a house they couldn't afford in an upscale neighborhood, had 2 children, Lily and Noah, and lived beyond their means. Each financial crisis was met with assistance from my parents, who would then quietly ask if I could help them catch up on their own bills. I usually did, feeling obligated despite my resentment growing. Meanwhile, my own financial discipline was often misinterpreted as excessive wealth. "Dwayne can cover it. He's doing great," became a common refrain at family gatherings, whether discussing restaurant bills or birthday gifts for the kids. I usually paid to avoid conflict, though each incident reinforced the unfair dynamic. The turning point in our family system should have been Amanda's divorce 3 years ago. Brad, tired of financial stress and Amanda's spending habits, filed for separation and moved to Arizona. The divorce left Amanda with primary custody of the kids, but limited child support due to Brad's own financial struggles in his new startup business. Rather than using this as an opportunity to reset her financial approach, Amanda moved into a luxury apartment she couldn't afford, explaining to everyone that the kids deserved a nice place during the transition. My parents, despite their own approaching retirement, helped with her rent for months, while depleting their savings yet again. During this period, I was focused on finalizing my Lakehouse purchase and keeping my consulting business thriving. I paid for weekend activities with my niece and nephew, and occasionally covered urgent bills for Amanda when the children's needs were at stake. But I started establishing firmer boundaries around regular financial support. These boundaries weren't well received. "He has so much but shares so little," I overheard Amanda telling our mother during a family barbecue last summer. "The kids barely know their uncle despite him having all that money." The comment stung because I had specifically scaled back work hours to spend more time with family, including taking Lily and Noah fishing several times that same month. When I finally closed on the Lakehouse, I decided to host a housewarming party for friends and family. It seemed like a perfect opportunity to share my achievement, while perhaps resetting some of the negative perceptions about my willingness to share. I spent weeks preparing, setting up the guest rooms for my parents and Amanda's family to stay the weekend, and planning activities everyone would enjoy. The party initially went well. Friends from work and college mingled with family members, everyone enjoying the scenic views and complimenting the renovations. I gave tours, proudly explaining the work I'd put into each space. But as the evening progressed and wine flowed, I noticed concerning conversations. "This place is perfect for family gatherings," my father announced loudly, while examining the spacious living room. "We'll make this our new tradition for holidays." He hadn't consulted me before making this proclamation, but I smiled awkwardly, not wanting to create tension during the celebration. Later, I found Amanda in what I had designated as my home office, measuring the walls with her hands. When I asked what she was doing, she casually replied, "Just seeing if my bedroom set would fit in here. This would be perfect for me, and the kids could take the room across the hall." "This is my office," I replied, confused by her planning. "I work from home 3 days a week." "You have that whole basement area," she countered dismissively. "This room has the better view for someone who's here full-time." I laughed it off as a joke, but discomfort settled in my stomach. During the remainder of the weekend, I caught similar comments, Mom discussing which kitchen items should be replaced to better serve everyone's needs, and Dad making a copy of my house key without explaining he should have one, in case of emergencies. I should have addressed these red flags immediately, but conflict avoidance has always been my weakness with family. Instead, I gently redirected conversations and hoped the weekend's end would reset boundaries. When everyone left Sunday evening, I convinced myself I had overreacted to innocent comments made in the excitement of the occasion. That self-deception would cost me dearly in the coming weeks. Friday night family dinners had been a tradition since Amanda's divorce. My parents believed regular gatherings would provide stability for Lily and Noah during the transition, and despite my busy schedule, I participated faithfully each week. These dinners typically followed a predictable pattern. Dad grilled something. Mom prepared side dishes. Amanda arrived late with the kids, and conversation revolved around safe topics like work projects and the children's school activities. The first Friday of October began no differently. I arrived at my parents' modest suburban home, carrying a bottle of wine and dessert from the bakery near my office. The familiar scent of Dad's famous barbecue ribs welcomed me, along with Mom's warm hug and updates about her garden club. Amanda hadn't arrived yet, typical, so I helped finish dinner preparations while catching up with my parents. When Amanda finally swept in with the children 40 minutes late, she seemed unusually animated. The kids ran to hug their grandparents while Amanda made herself a strong gin and tonic, her third this week, I would later learn. Throughout dinner, she appeared distracted, checking her phone repeatedly and exchanging knowing glances with our father. As we finished the main course, Dad cleared his throat in the way he always did before making announcements. "Amanda has some news," he said, nodding encouragingly toward my sister. Amanda straightened in her chair, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "The landlord is selling my building, and all tenants have to vacate by the end of the month," she began, though her tone lacked appropriate concern for someone facing imminent housing insecurity. "That's terrible," I said, calculating mentally whether I could help with moving expenses or perhaps the security deposit on a more affordable place. "Do you need help finding a new apartment? I know a few realtors who—" "No need," Amanda interrupted, waving dismissively. "We're moving in Monday." The statement hung in the air for a moment before I processed its implications. Moving in where, I asked, though a sinking feeling suggested I already knew the answer. "To your Lakehouse, of course," she replied, as if stating the obvious. "Dad already approved it." I turned toward my father, whose expression confirmed Amanda's claim. He nodded firmly, arms crossed in a posture that had always signaled his decisions were final. "We've discussed it," he stated. "Your sister needs a stable place for the kids, and your house has plenty of room. It's the perfect solution." The shock of this announcement left me momentarily speechless. My mother busied herself serving dessert, avoiding eye contact, while the children continued eating, oblivious to the tension suddenly filling the room. "You discussed my house without including me in the conversation," I finally managed, struggling to maintain my composure. "That's not how this works. You can't just decide someone is moving into my home." Amanda rolled her eyes dramatically. "Don't be so selfish, Dwayne. It's just temporary until I find something else. Maybe 6 months max." "6 months isn't temporary," I countered, feeling my heart rate accelerate. "And regardless of the time frame, you need to ask, not inform me after decisions have already been made." Dad's expression hardened. "Family helps family, son. Your sister and the kids need this. You have 3 bedrooms sitting empty most of the time in that big house of yours." "Those rooms aren't empty by accident," I explained, trying to remain calm. "I bought a house that suits my needs and lifestyle. I work from home regularly, host clients, and value my privacy." "Privacy?" Amanda scoffed. "What exactly do you need all that privacy for? It's just you rattling around in that huge place while we're cramped in a two-bedroom apartment." The conversation quickly deteriorated from there. Mom tried ineffectively to mediate, while Dad's tone grew increasingly authoritative. The real bombshell dropped when Amanda casually mentioned that Dad had already given her the spare key he'd taken during the housewarming party. What I turned to my father betrayal washing over me. It seemed practical, he defended, though his slight hesitation suggested he recognized the boundary violation. Families should have access to each other's homes. "That's not your decision to make," I said, standing up from the table. The children were now watching wide-eyed dessert forgotten. "I need you to return that key immediately." "Don't be ridiculous," Amanda snapped. "We've already started packing. The kids are excited about living near the lake." Looking at Lily and Noah, I could see they were indeed excited about the prospect, having no understanding of the inappropriate way this plan had been formed. Their innocent expressions complicated my emotions further. "I'm sorry," I said, firmly addressing everyone at the table, "but this isn't happening. My house isn't available for you to move into, especially not without even asking me first." "So you'd rather see your sister and niece and nephew homeless?" Dad's question dripped with accusation. "They won't be homeless," I countered. "Amanda has options that don't involve taking over my home without permission." Like what Amanda challenged. "The rental market is impossible right now, and I can't afford the security deposits they're asking. This is the only logical solution." "What about Mom and Dad's house?" I suggested. "There's the finished basement where you stayed after the divorce." "We're too old to have young children running around constantly." Mom interjected her first direct contribution to the discussion. "Your place is much more suitable with all that outdoor space for them to play." The circular arguments continued, until I realized no productive resolution would come that evening. Everyone had already decided my home was the answer to Amanda's problems, with or without my consent. The betrayal cut deep. Not just Amanda's entitlement, but my parents' willingness to override my autonomy so completely. "I need to go," I said, finally gathering my jacket. "This conversation isn't productive, and my answer remains no." "You've always been selfish," Amanda spat as I headed for the door. "Always hoarding your success instead of helping family." I paused, years of accumulated resentment, threatening to spill over in words I might regret. Instead, I simply said, "I'll talk to you all tomorrow when everyone's calmer." The drive home felt surreal. Radio announcers discussed trivial topics while my mind raced through implications and possible outcomes. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, if family solidarity should outweigh personal boundaries. Another part recognized this as the culmination of a lifelong pattern that needed disruption. As my Lakehouse came into view, illuminated by security lights against the dark shoreline, certainty settled in my chest. This sanctuary represented years of sacrifice and disciplined choices. I had earned this space and the right to determine how it was used. The family dynamics that had shaped our interactions for decades needed to change, and this boundary was where I would start. Little did I know how severely that boundary would be tested in the coming days. The notifications began before I'd even finished my morning coffee the next day. First came a text from Amanda thinking, "The blue bedroom for me, and the kids can share the one with bunk beds. Can you clear your stuff out by tomorrow?" No question, no acknowledgement of our discussion, just continued assumption that her plan would proceed despite my explicit refusal. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to frame a reply that wouldn't escalate tensions further. Before I could craft an appropriate message, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. "Dwayne, you need to reconsider this," she began without greeting. "Amanda was up all night crying. The children are confused about why their uncle doesn't want them." "That's not fair, Mom," I replied, frustrated by the emotional manipulation. "I never said I don't want them. I said Amanda can't move into my home without even asking first, especially for an indefinite period." "She has nowhere else to go," Mom insisted, her voice wavering for maximum effect. "As her brother, you have a responsibility to help in times of crisis." "I'm happy to help in many ways," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "I can assist with finding a new apartment, cover the security deposit, even help with moving costs. But giving up my home isn't the only solution here." "A security deposit doesn't solve the immediate problem," she countered. "The eviction is happening now. Where are they supposed to go while apartment hunting? They could stay with you and Dad temporarily, I suggested again. You know your father's back can't handle those inflatable mattresses anymore, she replied, though this limitation hadn't been mentioned previously. And our house is half the size of yours. The conversation looped in circles until Mom finally delivered her parting shot. I never thought my son would put material possessions above family welfare. Your father and I are very disappointed. The guilt trip might have worked in the past, but something had shifted inside me. Years of accommodating unreasonable expectations had built a reservoir of resentment that now fueled my resolve. After ending the call, I made two immediate decisions. First, to change the locks on my house, and second, to install an upgraded security system. The locksmith arrived within 2 hours, replacing all exterior locks and providing new keys that I would control exclusively. As he worked, my phone continuously buzzed with messages from family members. From Dad, a son's duty is to help his family, period. Your grandfather would be ashamed of your selfishness. From Amanda, already told the kids about their new rooms. Noah wants to know if he can put his Star Wars posters on the wall, or if you're too uptight for that too. From Mom, please call me back. We need to discuss this like adults. From my Uncle Robert, heard you're refusing to help Amanda and the kids. Tough situation, but family needs to stick together in hard times. The last message revealed that Amanda had already spread her version of events throughout the extended family, positioning me as the villain in her housing crisis. This realization prompted me to compose a single clear text that I sent to my parents and sister. I understand Amanda needs housing assistance. I'm willing to help financially with a new apartment, but my home is not available for her to move into. I've changed the locks today and am installing a security system. Please respect my property and boundaries. The responses were immediate and heated. Dad called twice, leaving voicemails that escalated from disappointed to furious. Amanda sent a series of increasingly hostile texts, accusing me of betrayal, cruelty, and even mental instability for being paranoid about security systems. Mom alternated between pleading messages and guilt-inducing reminders of all the sacrifices they had made for me growing up. By afternoon, the security company had installed a comprehensive system including doorbell cameras, motion sensors, and window alarms. The technician walked me through the smartphone application that would alert me to any activity around the property. Setting boundaries with family, he asked, sympathetically, while demonstrating the features. Happens more often than you'd think. That evening, the conflict migrated to social media. Amanda posted a vague but clearly targeted message. Amazing how some people can turn their backs on family in times of need. Material things really show someone's true character. The post accumulated sympathetic comments from relatives and mutual friends, many tagging me directly with questions or expressions of disappointment. Cousin Jennifer, always the family mediator, called to understand both sides. While initially appearing neutral, her questions revealed predetermined conclusions. Couldn't you just try it for a month and see how it goes, and what's the worst that could happen if they stay temporarily? When I explained my Saime, when Hargader Leo, concerns about temporary becoming permanent, and the violation of having decisions made about my property without consultation, she sighed heavily. Family is complicated, but at the end of the day, blood comes first. The pressure continued building through the weekend. Sunday brought a particularly difficult phone call with my father, who had moved from disappointment to outright anger. You've left us no choice but to take sides, he declared, his voice uncharacteristically cold. And we're standing with your sister. This isn't about taking sides, I tried explaining. It's about basic respect for boundaries and property. Property, he scoffed. Listen to yourself. Putting a house above the welfare of your own blood. I didn't raise you to be this kind of man. You raised me to work hard and be responsible, I countered. I've done exactly that. Amanda needs to address her situation responsibly too, not expect everyone else to accommodate her poor planning. Your sister is going through a divorce with 2 children to support, he nearly shouted. How dare you call that poor planning? The divorce was 3 years ago, I reminded him, and she's been living in an apartment she can't afford while refusing to look at more sustainable options. The conversation deteriorated further until Dad delivered his ultimatum. If you don't help your sister now, don't expect to be welcomed at Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or any family gathering moving forward. The threat of family excommunication hung heavily after we disconnected. Despite the mounting pressure, something had fundamentally changed in my response to these familiar tactics. The years of accommodating unreasonable expectations at my own expense had built a resilience I hadn't recognized until tested. My home represented not just a financial investment, but a symbol of my autonomy and the life I had built through deliberate choices. Monday morning arrived with a new work week, and I hoped the family drama might temporarily subside while everyone focused on their responsibilities. I left for the office early, grateful for the distraction of client meetings and project deadlines. Around 10:30, however, my phone vibrated with an alert from the security system motion-detected front entrance. Opening the application revealed live footage that stopped my heart. Amanda's minivan parked in my driveway, my parents' sedan behind it, and a small moving truck backing up to the front door. I watched in disbelief as Amanda approached my front door with the old key in hand, trying repeatedly to unlock the door as my parents unloaded suitcases from their car. The children stood nearby looking confused as Amanda grew visibly frustrated with the key that no longer worked. I immediately called my father's cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. Same with my mother's and sister's numbers. They had collectively decided to ignore communication while executing their plan. Left with no alternatives, I made 2 calls in quick succession, first to my office explaining a family emergency requiring immediate attention, and second to the county sheriff's non-emergency line. I need to report trespassers at my property. I explained to the dispatcher, feeling surreal, using such terms for my own family. They're attempting to enter without permission. Do you know these individuals? The dispatcher asked. Yes, I admitted. They're my family members, but they do not have permission to enter my home. I've explicitly denied access, and they're attempting entry anyway. As I drove the 30 minutes back to my Lakehouse, the security app continued sending alerts. The footage now showed Amanda trying the back door, while my father examined windows for potential entry points. The moving truck driver stood awkwardly nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding situation. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the scene had escalated further. Furniture and boxes sat on my lawn, partially unloaded from the truck before they'd realized they couldn't gain entry. Amanda was crying loudly, while my mother attempted to console her. My father paced angrily, phone in hand, presumably trying to reach me. What do you think you're doing? I asked, as I exited my car, struggling to keep my voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through me. What does it look like? Amanda shouted, mascara streaking down her face. We're moving in, but your precious locks have been changed. Real mature Dwayne. I told you explicitly that you cannot move in here, I said firmly. I sent clear messages to everyone stating this wasn't happening. So you'd rather see your niece and nephew homeless? My mother gestured toward the children, who were now sitting on a rolled-up carpet looking confused and upset. Stop using the kids as emotional leverage, I replied. The frustration of years finally breaking through. Amanda has never been at risk of actual homelessness. She has options she refuses to consider because they're not as convenient or luxurious as taking over my house. My father stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward my chest. You've always had everything handed to you. Always the golden boy with your fancy job and big house. The least you could do is help your sister when she needs it. The irony of his statement, considering I had worked for everything I owned while Amanda had received constant bailouts, might have made me laugh under different circumstances. Instead, I noticed a sheriff's department vehicle pulling into my driveway, bringing both relief and a new level of family humiliation. The confrontation was about to reach its breaking point with consequences none of us had truly anticipated. The sheriff's cruiser came to a stop beside the moving truck, and a tall officer with a weathered face and name tag reading, Sheriff Johnson, stepped out, surveying the scene with practiced neutrality. Furniture scattered across the lawn boxes stacked haphazardly, and 4 adults in various states of emotional distress created a tableau that clearly signaled domestic conflict. Afternoon, folks, he said, approaching with deliberate calm. Received a call about a trespassing situation. Who's the property owner here? I stepped forward, simultaneously relieved at the intervention and mortified at having involved law enforcement with family. "This is my residence." My father immediately interjected, "This is a family matter, officer. We don't need police involvement." His authoritative tone, effective in family settings, carried no special weight here. If there's unauthorized entry or attempted entry to private property, it becomes a legal matter. Sheriff Johnson explained patiently. He turned to me. "Can you explain the situation?" I took a deep breath, trying to present the facts objectively. My sister's apartment building is being sold and she needs to relocate. Without consulting me, my family decided she would move into my home. I explicitly refused permission. Multiple times changed the locks after they took a spare key without my knowledge, and clearly communicated that this arrangement wasn't acceptable. Today they arrived with a moving truck despite all that. The sheriff nodded, making notes in a small pad. "And you are?" he asked Amanda. "His sister," she replied, wiping tears dramatically. "With 2 children who are about to be homeless because their uncle cares more about his empty rooms than family. We have nowhere else to go," my mother added, arm around Amanda protectively. "Moving in with Dwayne is the only logical solution." Sheriff Johnson maintained his professional demeanor despite the emotional appeals. "Ma'am, regardless of family relationships, this remains private property. The owner has the legal right to determine who can and cannot reside here." "He's being unreasonable," my father insisted. "Family helps family in times of need." "That may be your family value system," the sheriff acknowledged. "But legally, your son has the right to deny entry to anyone, family included. Attempting to move in against his explicit refusal could constitute criminal trespass." The word criminal landed like a thunderclap in our family dynamic. My mother gasped audibly, while my father's face flushed deep red. Amanda's children, picking up on the escalating tension, began crying in earnest now. "You'd have us arrested?" Amanda asked incredulously. "Your own family." "I didn't want any of this," I replied, emotion finally breaking through my composed facade. "I asked you repeatedly to respect my boundaries. You gave me no choice but to protect my property when you ignored every reasonable request." Sheriff Johnson intervened as Amanda prepared another tearful rebuttal. "Here's what needs to happen now," he said firmly. "All belongings need to be loaded back onto the moving truck. Everyone not residing at this property needs to leave the premises. If entry is attempted again without the owner's permission, charges could be filed." "This is ridiculous," my father sputtered. "We're his parents." "Parental status doesn't override property rights once a child is an adult," Sheriff Johnson explained with the patience of someone who'd mediated many family disputes. "Your son has been clear about his boundaries." What followed was perhaps the most painful 30 minutes of our family history. Under the sheriff's watchful eye, furniture and boxes were reluctantly reloaded onto the moving truck. Noah, my 10-year-old nephew, looked at me with confusion and hurt that cut deeper than any adult accusation. "I thought we were going to live near the water," he said quietly as he clutched his backpack. "I'm sorry, buddy," I replied, kneeling to his level. "I love having you visit, but this isn't the right way for it to happen." My mother refused to look at me throughout the process, while my father alternated between angry mutters and tense silence. Amanda oscillated between tearful breakdowns and venomous glares in my direction. The moving truck driver, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama, worked quickly to secure the hastily reloaded items. As the last box was loaded, Sheriff Johnson addressed the group again. "I understand family disputes are complicated, but there are appropriate channels for resolving them. I'd suggest a calm conversation at a neutral location after emotions have settled." My father snorted derisively at the suggestion while helping Lily into the minivan. Amanda strapped the children into their seats without a word to me, then turned for one final accusation. "I hope you enjoy your empty house and your precious privacy. Was it worth destroying your family for?" Before I could respond, she slammed the van door and started the engine. My parents retreated to their car without goodbye. The small procession moving truck minivan and my parents' sedan pulled away from my driveway under Sheriff Johnson's supervision. The sudden silence felt both liberating and devastating. "Family conflicts are among the toughest situations we handle," the sheriff remarked, returning to where I stood alone on my lawn. especially when both sides believe they're acting from the right place. "I didn't want it to come to this," I said, the adrenaline fading and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Rarely does anyone want law enforcement involved in family matters," he acknowledged. "But sometimes boundaries need official reinforcement. I'd recommend documenting any further attempts at entry or communication that feels harassing." After the sheriff departed, I entered my intact but emotionally tainted sanctuary. The Lakehouse that had represented achievement and peace now felt like ground zero for a family nuclear event. My phone had accumulated 27 missed calls and 43 text messages during the confrontation, most containing variations of disbelief, anger, and accusations. The extended family text chain had exploded with activity. Uncle Robert wrote, absolutely disgusted that police were called on family. Shameful behavior. Cousin Patricia added, those poor children seeing their uncle treat them like criminals. Even usually neutral relatives had chosen sides, most aligning against what was characterized as my selfish and cruel behavior. Among the barrage, a single message from my cousin Ryan stood out. Need to talk when you're ready. Been through something similar with my brother last year. Not everyone will understand setting boundaries, but some of us do. That evening, while watching the sunset from my deck, a ritual that usually brought peace, I made the hardest call of the ordeal. The family therapist I'd researched had excellent reviews for helping with boundary issues and family estrangement. I'd like to schedule an appointment, I said, when the receptionist answered. I'm dealing with a family situation that's escalated beyond my ability to manage alone. The simple admission felt simultaneously like defeat and the first step toward healing. As darkness settled over the lake, I acknowledged that the family dynamics shaped over decades couldn't be resolved in a single confrontation or even several. The path forward would be neither quick nor painless, but necessary for my well-being and ultimately for healthier family relationships. My phone pinged with a final message for the day, my mother informing me that my invitation to Thanksgiving was officially revoked. The holiday was 6 weeks away, but the preemptive exclusion signaled how deeply the day's events had fractured our family system. Rather than responding defensively, I simply acknowledged receipt of the message. That night, sleep eluded me despite physical and emotional exhaustion. The security system installed to protect against the very people I'd once trusted implicitly sent occasional alerts as nocturnal creatures triggered the motion sensors. Each notification momentarily spiked my anxiety before reason reasserted itself. The Lakehouse remained secure, but the family I had always known was irrevocably changed. The week following what I now thought of as the moving truck incident passed in a haze of uncomfortable workdays and sleepless nights. Professional obligations provided temporary distraction, but concentrating on client needs proved nearly impossible with my personal life in shambles. I found myself checking the security app compulsively, half expecting to find family members attempting another entry. The communication blackout from my immediate family continued uninterrupted. My daily calls to my parents went straight to voicemail and texts received no response. Through social media, I learned Amanda had launched a GoFundMe campaign titled Single Mom and Kids Facing Homelessness, which carefully avoided naming me, but included enough details that mutual connections could identify the situation. The campaign raised over $8,000 in 3 days, solving the immediate housing crisis without requiring my home. The extended family, however, maintained aggressive communication. Daily messages arrived, questioning my character priorities and mental health. Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, called to inform me she was deeply ashamed of my actions and suggested I seek psychological help for my obvious issues with compassion. Uncle William, typically uninvolved in family matters, sent a lengthy email detailing his disappointment and suggesting I should sell the Lakehouse if I valued material possessions over human connections. The isolation might have been unbearable without Ryan's support. My cousin's experience with his brother, who had similarly attempted to claim Ryan's vacation cabin as a permanent residence following financial difficulties, provided valuable perspective and validation. They'll rewrite the narrative to make you the villain, he warned during our first real conversation about the situation. The only way through is to hold your boundary with compassion but absolute firmness. 2 weeks after the confrontation, my mother finally responded to one of my messages with a brief text. Amanda and the children are staying with us temporarily. She found an apartment but can't move in until November 1st. Just so you know, we're handling it without your help." The passive-aggressive tone stung, but the information provided relief. At least a solution had been found that respected my boundaries while meeting Amanda's needs. I responded simply, "I'm glad to hear that. I'm still happy to help with moving costs or anything else she needs for the new place." No acknowledgement came, but the following day I received an unexpected email from my father. The message, formal and devoid of his usual conversational style, outlined specific conditions under which I might be permitted to rejoin family gatherings. These included a formal apology to Amanda for prioritizing property over family welfare, financial contribution toward her new apartment, since your selfishness created additional expenses, and a written agreement making my Lakehouse available for family emergencies in the future. The terms revealed how fundamentally my parents misunderstood or refused to acknowledge the actual issue at hand. This wasn't about property versus family, but about basic respect for boundaries and adult autonomy. Rather than responding emotionally, I forwarded the email to the therapist I'd begun seeing weekly, adding it to our discussion topics for our next session. Dr. Patricia Winters, a family systems specialist, had helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns underlying our family conflict. "What you're experiencing is a family struggling with a challenge to its established hierarchy and expectations," she explained during our second session. "By purchasing the Lakehouse, becoming financially successful, and then enforcing boundaries, you've disrupted the family's understanding of who has power and how resources should be distributed." Through our sessions, I began recognizing how my role as the responsible one had created expectations that I would perpetually accommodate others' needs, regardless of personal cost. Dr. Winters helped me develop strategies for maintaining boundaries without unnecessary cruelty, acknowledging my family's perspective while not yielding to inappropriate demands. "Healing doesn't always mean returning to previous patterns," she cautioned when I expressed concern about permanent estrangement. "Sometimes it means establishing new, healthier relationships with clearer boundaries." Thanksgiving approached with no resolution in sight. My exclusion from the family gathering remained in effect despite several attempts at initiating conversation about alternatives. The holiday I spent with friends from work who organized an orphan's Thanksgiving for colleagues without local family celebrations. Though warmly welcomed, the experience highlighted the painful reality of family fracture. The following week brought unexpected news via Ryan, who had attended the family Thanksgiving. "Thought you should know," he texted afterward. "Amanda announced at dinner that she's moving to Grand Rapids in January. Apparently Brad is relocating his business to Michigan and wants more involvement with the kids. They're not getting back together but trying a co-parenting arrangement in the same city." This development explained why Amanda had been so desperate for temporary housing. She'd known all along the situation was short-term while planning a more significant move. The revelation added another layer of frustration to the conflict. Had she simply communicated honestly about her plans, alternative solutions might have been found without the dramatic confrontation. Early December brought the first slight thaw in relations when my mother called unexpectedly one Tuesday evening. The conversation began stiffly with careful avoidance of direct references to the conflict, but gradually warmed as we discussed neutral topics like her garden club's winter project and my recent business trip to Chicago. Before ending the call, she hesitantly mentioned that Noah had been asking about me. "He misses your fishing trips," she admitted reluctantly. "The therapist says maintaining relationships with extended family is important during transitions." The mention of a therapist surprised me. My parents had always dismissed mental health support as unnecessary. Perhaps the family crisis had created unexpected openings for growth in multiple directions. "I'd love to see the kids," I replied carefully. "Maybe we could arrange something that works for everyone." The resulting arrangement meeting at a neutral public location with my mother present felt somewhat artificial but represented progress nonetheless. The children's innocent perspective provided unexpected healing. They greeted me with unrestrained enthusiasm at the bowling alley we'd chosen for our reunion, more concerned with showing me their improved techniques than dwelling on adult conflicts. As Christmas approached, my father made his first direct contact via a brief, awkward phone call. "Your mother thinks we should discuss holiday arrangements," he began without greeting, voice gruff with unresolved emotion. Amanda and the kids are staying through New Year's before the move. If you want to see them, we could arrange something at our house, provided you're willing to be civil. The conditional invitation represented my father's limited capacity for reconciliation, not ideal, but a starting point. After consultation with Dr. Winters, I accepted with clear parameters a short Christmas Eve visit with gifts. For the children, no discussion of the Lakehouse situation, unless initiated by me, and the understanding that healing our relationship would require time and mutual respect. The holiday visit proceeded with strained politeness among the adults and genuine joy with the children. Amanda and I maintained careful distance, exchanging minimal pleasantries while focusing on making the experience positive for Noah and Lily. My parents oscillated between old familiar warmth and new cautious formality. Progress, though modest, had begun. January brought Amanda's move to Grand Rapids and a gradual easing of family tensions. My mother began calling weekly, our conversations slowly rebuilding connection. My father remained more distant but occasionally joined these calls briefly, a small acknowledgement of continued relationship. The extended family, following the lead of my parents, gradually reduced hostile communications. 3 months after the confrontation, I invited Ryan and his family to the Lakehouse for a weekend visit, my first attempt at hosting family since the housewarming disaster. The positive experience gave me confidence to extend similar invitations to other relatives, selectively rebuilding family connections on new foundations of mutual respect. The healing process had begun, though complete restoration of family relationships remained a distant goal. The Lakehouse once again felt like a sanctuary, rather than a battlefield, and I had gained invaluable insight into both myself and the complex dynamics that had shaped our family for generations. Spring brought renewal to both the Lakehouse landscape and my family relationships. The snow melted from the shoreline, early flowers pushed through the soil in garden beds I'd established the previous year, and subtle shifts in family communication indicated healing in progress. 3 months of limited contact had provided necessary space for reflection on all sides. Amanda settled into her new life in Grand Rapids, securing a position at a marketing firm and establishing a co-parenting routine with Brad that seemed to benefit the children. Our direct communication remained minimal, but monthly video calls with Noah and Lily helped maintain our connection. During these conversations, Amanda would briefly appear, offering polite, if somewhat distant greetings, progress from the open hostility that had characterized our last in-person interaction. My mother's weekly calls had evolved from careful small talk to more genuine exchanges. During a particularly open conversation in early April, she surprised me with an unexpected acknowledgement. "I've been thinking about what happened," she began hesitantly. "With Amanda and the Lakehouse situation, I still wish things had gone differently, but I understand now why you felt your boundaries were violated." The admission, though partial, represented significant movement in our relationship. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, careful not to push too hard on this fragile bridge. "It means a lot to hear you understand my perspective." "Your father and I didn't handle it well," she continued after a pause. "We've always tried to protect Amanda, sometimes at your expense. The therapist has helped us see that pattern more clearly." Learning that my parents had continued therapy beyond the initial crisis brought unexpected hope. Their willingness to examine long-standing family dynamics suggested possibilities for healthier relationships moving forward. My father's reconciliation came more gradually and with less explicit acknowledgement. His communication style relied more on actions than words, calling to ask about a plumbing issue at the Lakehouse, sending an article about fishing conditions on Lake Michigan, offering to help with dock maintenance when weather improved. Each gesture represented a small step toward rebuilding our relationship on new foundations. The true breakthrough came unexpectedly in May, when my phone rang late one evening. Seeing my father's name on the screen brought momentary anxiety. Late calls usually signaled emergency rather than casual conversation. "Everything okay?" I answered, immediately concerned. Fine," he assured quickly. "Just wanted to run something by you." He cleared his throat uncomfortably before continuing. "Your mother and I are thinking about the holiday schedule this year. We'd like to try something different from the usual cramped gathering at our house." My breath caught, anticipating where the conversation might be heading, but hesitant to assume. We were wondering, he continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty, if you might consider hosting Thanksgiving at your place, only if you're comfortable with it. And we'd respect whatever house rules you set. The request represented far more than a practical inquiry about holiday logistics. It acknowledged my ownership and authority over my space, recognized the need for explicit permission rather than assumption, and offered respect for boundaries I might establish. Coming from my father, who had previously threatened permanent estrangement over this very issue, the shift was momentous. "I'd like that," I replied, emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. "But I'd want to be clear about expectations up front, so everyone knows what they're agreeing to." "That's reasonable," he acknowledged the absence of defensiveness, marking another significant change. "Your house, your rules." We discussed practical considerations, guest list duration, a day visit rather than overnight stays, menu planning, and shared responsibilities. Throughout the conversation, my father maintained respect for my parameters, a stark contrast to the entitled approach that had characterized the previous year's conflict. After that conversation, I worked with Dr. Winters to develop clear, reasonable house rules for family visits, guidelines that would protect my boundaries while allowing genuine connection. These included specific invitation for each visit, rather than standing access, defined durations communicated in advance, respect for private areas of the house, and shared responsibility for meal preparation and cleanup. When I shared these guidelines with my parents, they responded with acceptance rather than resistance. "Seems reasonable to me," my father commented, while my mother added, "It's good to have clear expectations, helps avoid misunderstandings." Amanda's response to the Thanksgiving plan came through my mother. Initially, she felt uncomfortable with the arrangement, but would attend for the children's sake. Her reluctance was understandable. Our conflict remained less resolved than my relationship with our parents. However, her willingness to participate despite discomfort suggested openness to gradual reconciliation. As spring progressed into summer, I invited my parents for a Saturday lunch at the Lakehouse, their first visit since the confrontation. The experience proved surprisingly positive, with both making visible efforts to respect boundaries while I worked equally hard at gracious hosting. My father admired recent improvements without making possessive comments, while my mother complimented the space without suggestions for change. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Noah and Lily visited for a weekend in July, accompanied by Amanda for drop-off and pickup. These brief interactions allowed us to rebuild minimal civility, focusing on coexisting peacefully rather than addressing lingering resentments directly. During her second visit, Amanda unexpectedly commented, "The place looks nice," before quickly returning to practical matters about the children's schedule. A tiny olive branch I gratefully acknowledged with a simple thanks. By autumn, family communication had established new patterns. Weekly calls with my mother, occasional practical conversations with my father, monthly video chats with the children, and civil if limited exchanges with Amanda created a foundation for the planned Thanksgiving gathering. The extended family, following the lead of my parents, had largely ceased hostile communications, though certain relatives maintained distant relationships. Thanksgiving arrived with both anticipation and anxiety. I had prepared thoroughly, cleaning the Lakehouse to perfection, planning a menu that incorporated everyone's favorites, arranging comfortable but separate spaces for various family groupings to prevent tension. Dr. Winters and I had developed strategies for managing potential conflicts, including pre-established phrases for redirecting difficult conversations and permission to take brief breather breaks if needed. To my relief and slight amazement, the gathering proceeded more smoothly than anticipated. 11 family members, my parents, Amanda and her children, Ryan and his wife, and several cousins, shared the Lakehouse space with reasonable harmony. My father adhered scrupulously to established boundaries, even shushing a cousin who began discussing bedroom arrangements for future visits. Amanda maintained polite distance, but participated in group activities without obvious resentment. After dinner, as families sprawled comfortably in various corners of the great room, my mother sat beside me on the deck, watching the sunset reflect on the lake. "This was nice," she said simply. "Different from what we're used to, but nice." "It feels like a new tradition in the making," I suggested cautiously. She nodded, silent for a moment, before adding, Your boundaries were hard for us to accept at first. We've always operated differently, but I can see now that clear expectations make gatherings like this possible." She patted my hand briefly. "You stood your ground when we were wrong. It wasn't easy, but it was probably necessary." The acknowledgement, though understated, represented healing I had once doubted possible. Perfect resolution remained distant. Amanda still maintained emotional reserve. My father occasionally lapsed into old patterns before catching himself, and certain topics remained carefully avoided. But the family gathering in my Lakehouse, proceeding with mutual respect rather than entitlement, marked tremendous progress from the moving truck confrontation a year earlier. As guests departed the following morning, Amanda lingered briefly after loading the children's belongings. "The kids really love it here," she said, avoiding direct eye contact. "Maybe next summer they could visit for a week, if that works with your schedule and house rules." The explicit acknowledgement of my authority regarding my space, coming from the person who had most vehemently challenged it, felt like the closing of a difficult chapter. "I'd like that," I replied. "We can work out the details that respect everyone's needs." She nodded once before joining the children in the minivan, our reconciliation still tentative, but moving in the right direction. Standing on my deck that evening, watching distant family cars disappear down the winding road, I reflected on the tumultuous year and its unexpected lessons. The Lakehouse remained my sanctuary, but its meaning had evolved. What began as a symbol of independent achievement had become the setting for a different kind of success, the establishment of healthy boundaries that paradoxically allowed for more authentic connection. The journey had proven painful but necessary. Standing firm against entrenched family patterns required courage I hadn't known I possessed. The temporary fracture in relationships made space for new, healthier connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. While perfect resolution remained a work in progress, the foundation for sustainable family relationships had been established. As darkness settled over the lake, I realized the most valuable asset I'd gained wasn't the property itself, but the self-respect that came from protecting it. Some might still view my actions as selfish or unnecessary, but I had found peace in the knowledge that boundaries and love could coexist, that true family connection thrived in the soil of mutual respect rather than obligation. Have you ever had to stand firm on boundaries with family members who didn't understand your perspective? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Like this video if you've experienced similar family dynamics, and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complex relationships. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's the foundation for authentic connection. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own journey toward healthy relationships.